So we wanted to talk a little bit about the latest with regard to this, what I think we can now pretty clearly call a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, which went into effect shortly before Trump took office. Mac, let's go ahead and pull up just so people can see, as now Palestinians in Gaza are starting to return home. We're getting more and more images of some of the devastation here. Mac, if you can pull up the Gaza devastation, then also this image of Jabalia that we have here in the rundown. The level of destruction is just nearly complete, especially in northern Gaza. It's absolutely insane what it looks like. You can see it's just, I don't even know what that is. That looks like an ambulance at one point. You can see images of vehicles, trucks that are crushed, rubble everywhere. People have been reporting that as they've been returning to their destroyed homes, horrific reports of relatives' remains that they're finding, in some instances with sniper wounds having been shot in the head. There have been some breaches, by the way, too, already of the ceasefire by the Israelis in the Gaza Strip. So it has been largely calm, but not 100% calm. And then Trump actually was asked yesterday, if we can prepare the Trump ceasefire shot, Trump was actually asked yesterday in the context of signing all of these executive orders, how confident he was that they would be able to maintain the calm in Gaza. Let's go ahead when you guys are ready for that and take a listen to that.
Then are you, Mr. President, that you can keep the ceasefire in Gaza and conclude the 3 phases of this deal?
I'm not confident. That's not our war, it's their war, but I'm not confident. But I think they're very weakened on the other side.
Do you support the 2-state?
Gaza, boy, I looked at a picture of Gaza. Gaza is like a massive demolition site. That place it's really got to be rebuilt in a different way.
Do you plan to help rebuilding Gaza?
I might. Gaza is interesting. It's a phenomenal location. On the sea, the best weather. Everything's good. It's like some beautiful things could be done with it, but it's very interesting. But some fantastic things could be done with Gaza.
How do you see the future in governance for Gaza?
Well, it depends. I can't imagine you could have, you certainly can't have the people that were there. Most of them are dead.
So he says there he's not confident at all that this will continue. And, Saagar, this, of course, comports with some of what Bibi Netanyahu has been saying as well, and Bezalel Smotrich. So I think Shael, when we had him on, laid it out pretty clearly that basically, as part of Bibi's coalition, he had Ben Gvir, who has now actually exited the coalition because he's upset about this deal, and he has Smotrich. Smotrich extracted a promise. I don't know that Bibi was really opposed to this, but that they would go back to the war once phase 1 was complete. And this has now been reported by many Israeli sources. Bibi himself came out and said effectively the same thing. He said that he got promises both from Biden and from Trump that they would be able to return to the war after phase 1 was complete. And so when you see Trump here, 2 of his executive actions too, by the way, and I'll get to that in just a moment, had to do with Israel. But when you see him here, honestly, just yeah, whatever, I'm not confident it's going to continue, not seeming to really care whether it continues or not, I think it's a very negative indication of where this is potentially heading.
Yeah, look, I think I was modestly optimistic that something would happen because I thought that the Israeli government might fall. Not because of what pressure would happen on the Trump side. And I don't know, maybe I still am an idiot, but Israelis, do you really want to keep this shit going? You're losing a lot of money. 500 of your soldiers were killed as a result of the same ceasefire deal being on the table. I know Bibi and the government may not care about the hostages, but I know all of you care about the hostages. There's still a lot of hostages who are being left. Is this really the course of action that you want to take? We've had resurgence and or recruitment of a number of Hamas people. If you want to continue the war, this will take, how long has it been since October 7th? It's been almost 18 months, right? Yeah. So if you think about it in Iraq context, we're roughly in the 05 mark. And guess what happened to somebody else's country when they fought a similar type war in '05. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare for years going forward. That's effectively what you were committing yourself to. So maybe I'm dumb. I just think that I still have like a modest confidence. Like there's some democratic input or something going on in that country. I have no idea. Look, on the American side.
I think what they would say, obviously I wildly disagree with this, but what they would say is it's sort of analogous to when we withdrew from Afghanistan, then you have to reckon with this, what did we do all these years, right? The Taliban is just right back in power. Like, what were we doing what did we spend all this money for? What did we lose all these lives for? What did we destroy this entire country for? Like, what were we doing? And it's a similar thing here. Like already, Hamas is out in the streets and they're happy that the ceasefire is in place. And there is no other, because, the Israelis weren't interested actually in some sort of like peaceful solution that would lead to a better governance. Bibi has always enjoyed the fact that Hamas was in power in Gaza so he could point to them and say, I don't have a partner for peace. Like those dynamics haven't changed. And so they don't want to have a reckoning with the fact that, yes, they killed a lot of civilians. Yes, Gaza is rubble. Yes, they have inflicted mass pain, suffering, starvation, illness, death, etc. But you did not destroy Hamas. And so I think there's a desire to not reckon with that reality that pushes not all, but a large part of Israeli society towards, no, we just need to keep killing more. We just need to keep this war going. And, certainly within the Bibi's coalition, that's the majority, I would say, sentiment is in that direction. So, again, there was some hope that maybe this would be important to Trump because he would think it would be embarrassing if they just went back to the fighting. But certainly the indications from that side are he's just like, yeah, it's their war, whatever. I don't think it'll really hold, but we'll see.
I think you're right. Look, let's also be honest. Trump is the most pro-Israel president to literally ever take office. Not in terms of his background, but in terms of the concrete promises he made.
And the people he's put in place.
And
Miriam Adelson was sitting right there at the inauguration.
As you said, I've tried to prepare people for reality. The reality is Israel is going to annex the West Bank, okay? Get over it. And if you were with Trump, that's just part of the things you're going to have to think. If you care a lot about it, you shouldn't have voted for him. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
If you want him to cut weapons off to Israel, it will never happen in the current political context. The issue has become totally polarized, left and right. There is zero reward mechanism in the Republican Party.
That's right.
For why would you do it? I can't, you don't even want to know. Maybe one day I'll tell everybody the stories here about what even my modest commentary, I would think, maybe you would disagree, on the Israel issue has cost me in terms of my personal life, in terms of ties cut, etc., and bullshit smears, being pushed behind the scenes. Yeah, I should do it one day. But my point is just and I'm an idiot. I'm nobody, just a commentator over here. Now imagine being in power, somebody who's a congressman or a senator. Their reward mechanism doesn't exist. Here's, again, the truth. Israel will never be cut off. That what really happens is up to them. They will annex the West Bank. Our ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, said he doesn't believe in a two-state solution, which basically means that's U.S. government policy. The best thing that you should all hope for, if you're pro-Palestine or anti-war, whatever, is you should hope that the chaos over there is so out of control and so affects domestic politics and or energy prices here at home that they'll do something about it, which is the main impetus, right, for a lot of this is he loves the peacemaker, the image. He doesn't care about the issue. By the way, who cares how we get it done? I gave advice to people, send the people in Gaza MAGA hats. If you really want this to happen, you need to make it politically convenient, interesting for Trump to posture. For example, remember that article that we put up on our show, Arab officials from the Times of Israel? Trump pressured Netanyahu more in one meeting than anyone else. Guess what? He posted that on his Truth Social because all he cares about is his own ego. Apparently, the Israelis are now attacking Steve Witkoff. They've been leaking and being like, he's a Qatari-owned asset, or what the Las Vegas Jewish billionaire is, of course, a Qatari-owned asset. They hate it because he pressured them to take this ceasefire deal. So stuff like that, if you get it to Trump, he's an egotistical person. So to the extent that if you guys all want to play the game, that's the only way this is all going to happen.
Yeah, but even that, Hegseth and Huckabee are both end times zealots. the administration has already been staffed in the way that Miriam Adelson wanted it to be staffed.
That's true.
And so, to your point about the West Bank, which I will not personally be getting over, but I know what you're saying, just like that's the reality.
Look, Krystal,
like,
you didn't vote for Trump. I'm saying, look, being totally honest, I had to reconcile myself to this. I'm like, all right, we have two choices. It's binary. It's not easy. What do we choose? We choose probably in the same way that you used to think about Biden before Gaza. You're like, I like the IRA tax credits, so I like Lena Khan, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, at the end of the day, look, I mean, people know my worldview. I don't give a shit about most other countries. I mostly care about what's happening here. To the extent I care about what's happening abroad is to the extent that it's affecting us here at home. That's probably a decision I had to make. That's probably millions of people had to make that type of decision, and I don't begrudge people for making it.
But I do think that there was a lot of fake wish casting about that was not like
campaign. No,
I know, but I'm just saying, like, you may have been in touch with that reality, but I think there were many people who weren't, and honestly aren't still. But I mentioned 2 executive orders from Trump relevant to Israel. One of them was, I mentioned before, Biden had put in place. I mean, it's like the most tiny slap on the wrist sort of thing that Biden could have done, but sanctioning some of the violent settlers, pretending like they're not like fully backed by the Israeli government. But in any case, there were some like 33 individuals who were sanctioned through these methods. Trump rolled that back, and he also rolled back some limitations that had been put in place on shipping 2,000-pound bombs, which I didn't even know there were any limitations on any arms shipments from the Biden administration. But in any case,
that's a supply thing. It's not because of morality.
Yeah.
It's to keep them for ourselves. That's the reason.
So in any case, those restrictions have been lifted under Trump as well, just to give you a sense of where things are headed. And then, in addition to, I think, very likely after phase 1, bombings continue in Gaza and they go right back to the fight. The West Bank is under increasing attack. We can put this up on the screen. Jeremy Scahill and Dropsite News have, and our own Ryan Grimm have, of course, been doing a great job of covering what's going on there. One thing that they did is they announced this quote-unquote counter-terror operation in the occupied West Bank. They shut down all kinds of roads. I mean, Palestinian movement in the West Bank is already extremely limited, and now it's even more so. And then you have settlers that have just been violently rampaging in a number of Palestinian villages, in some instances overtly backed by Israeli forces that are now, as Jeremy reports, invading and attacking parts of Jenin. In addition, there was actually an incident where settlers were setting fires and attacking this village, and Israeli police thought the settlers were Palestinians and shot them. Mm-hmm. And now this is a big story in Israel, because it turned out that they weren't Palestinians who we don't care about killing. They were actually settlers, Jewish settlers. So this is sort of an explicit plan that, all right, while we're having this calm in Gaza temporarily, we're going to move on the West Bank. This will be also a pretext that's used in addition to, to return to the war as well. So that's the latest that we have coming out of the Middle East, and none of it is particularly good news.
Yeah, look, my only optimism for a ceasefire, for any of this, was the at least credit. By the way, another reason, way that you would want this to happen is you should have the Nobel Foundation award Trump the Nobel Peace Prize. They should come out and do that immediately to give him more of an incentive. People think I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. This is if you guys want to play Washington. You could care about one thing. You could care about posturing, or you can care about getting shit done. I can guarantee you the people who would be alive from influencing Donald Trump, they don't care how you accomplish this. So if you are the Irish government or any of these other people who are taking a little bit of a dissonant, policy or whatever towards Israel, that's how you should get it done. That's the only way. Is you have to fed him, you have to feed his ego. That's how it's going to work. By the way, I'm already prepping for myself on Ukraine, just to give people the background. Like, there is a titanic fight behind the scenes going on right now over Ukraine, because you have people like Mike Waltz and others who have completely different historical past on the Ukraine issue and are willing to come along, but they're not going to do the work, right? Some of the people who are actually going to be in charge of this policy, Keith Kellogg and a few others, are true believers, but you have to work your way through the bureaucracy to get that up. And then when I turn on Fox and Friends, the dumbest program on cable television, which Donald Donald Trump watches every day is Brian Kilmeade, who is a Ukraine fanatic, right? Who's
he still is?
Absolute. I mean, he's not going to say it anymore, but listen, some of us haven't forgotten.
On their
Brian,
ideology.
Brian, some of us have not forgotten. He's an old school neocon Republican. He's worked at Fox News for 20 years.
So many
he
of
needs
these
a brain
people
lobotomy.
just stopped calling themselves neocons, but did not change their ideology even in a sliver.
Yeah.
You know, they just realized that the term has a negative connotation now. So they're like, oh, I'm not that, but I totally support every war that's ever existed. So.
Yeah, right. So that's the thing about, but my point is about the media environment, right? So the media environment that Trump needs to consume is one which actually has some dissonance in it. Now, that's helped a little bit because of Tucker being no longer at Fox News, and he's in his ear on Ukraine and on Iran and a few other things that he can do, but he's just one man. I mean, you can't ultimately, truly affect everything through just being on the internet. We're dealing with a, 79-year-old man here at the end of the day. So yeah, look, I'm being very transparent. Like, that's the one thing I'm gonna peg myself to, is trying to end this war. I think it will be one of the biggest fights in the history of Washington, because Afghanistan is nothing compared to the cash cow and the ideology around this. Like, remember, how Biden worshipped at the feet of NATO? Like, that's a real thing here. Like, people, the Atlantic Council, the Carnegie.
Every AUKUS voter is here within a 10-mile radius.
Like, these people religiously pray to the God of NATO. There are people in my neighborhood who have NATO flags. Where do you even get a NATO flag? It's unbelievable.
I mean, it's still like Cold War hangover mentality.
It's crazy.
And it is wild how much that still really dominates the foreign policy blob in this town. I mean, I took very close note, maybe in some of the later speeches in the day, Trump brought up Ukraine, but considering how much a focus it was among Republicans, he talked a lot about it on the campaign trail.
Tons, yeah.
I think partly he didn't really bring it up because, he repeatedly promised, like, it's going to be solved before I even get into office. Day one, we're going to have a deal. Obviously, that didn't happen. So, I think it's an acknowledgement that even if he wants to end it, it's not like you can this isn't one. Israel, you could actually just snap your fingers and be like, we're not supplying you these weapons anymore. You're going to stop. We're not doing this. Like, you could actually do that with Israel. Ukraine and Russia, it is a little different because you got to get the Russians to the table. You got the Ukrainians to the table. You got to, obviously there's a lot we could do, but it's not as simple of a fix. And it does require, like, real ideological consistency of a sort that Donald Trump is frankly not particularly known for. And he has a soft spot for Zelensky, too. I mean, he's always liked Zelensky.
So that's another thing. I highly encourage people. Lex Friedman, in his latest podcast, did a breakdown of his Zelensky interview. And I don't think he would mind saying this. I spent a lot of time with him this weekend. Because he said it publicly, so I'll just repeat what he said. What he was telling me, and what he also said publicly, was his big takeaway from his Zelensky interview was, it's not a show. He believes it. And he does not care about peace. He has no interest in peace. So Lex asked multiple iterations of peace questions to Zelensky. Zelensky has drank his own Kool-Aid to the extent that he believes he is like Winston Churchill. And the policy which will require to force a political settlement on Zelensky, which is now the only option to achieve peace in Ukraine, is either we'd have to support a coup in Ukraine, which I don't think is a good idea, or, maybe they could have their own elections. That's up to Zelensky's not going to allow that to happen. There's the only option here, basically, is a return to some, treaties from the 1800s where Trump and Putin will sit across a desk from each other and just be like, here's the line of control. That's it. And then you go to the Ukraine and be like, this is what's happening. And as you know, and what we were just discussing, do you know the political fallout from the freak out of the media here in Washington of forcing a political settlement onto him? I don't think Zelensky will ever play ball based on what Lex told me. I could be wrong. At the end of the day, he's a client state, right? He'd rather be alive than be defeated and humiliated on the battlefield. But equally, Trump would want to avoid that at all costs, because look, even if Ukraine got taken over, I still wouldn't think it would be worth going to nuclear war for it over. But as we all learned from Afghanistan, if you broadcast cities Kyiv 24/7 and turn this into a cause celeb, it can go like this in public opinion. Public opinion is still not, in my opinion, great on Ukraine. It's still number 3 issue that people rate Biden's effectiveness on.
Yeah.
There's a boomer mentality about Russia that lives deep in the American mind.
Yeah, I mean, it was really sold as like a values proposition.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, and I mean, there is a value proposition there. Like, that's not, like, our country doesn't have really the credibility to frame it as a values proposition. But this idea of like, no, we have this established order that you don't get to just push your weight around because you're the larger country. Like, Russia invading Ukraine was genuinely bad and wrong. But then you have to ask, like, okay, given where we are, what is the best and most reasonable path forward? And the Ukrainians would have gotten a much better deal if, instead of being interested in continuing this war, if we had been interested in negotiating a peaceful settlement. And that was really the massive missed opportunity. So many lives, so much destruction between then and now, only for Ukraine to be in a worse position in terms of what they're going to end up getting here at the end of the day, whenever this thing burns out. So I don't know if I read the media landscape the same way you do, because I feel like there's a lot of Ukraine fatigue and also just less willingness to resist Trump's edicts in any particular direction.
Jake Tapper literally wrote a book
No, I expected the Afghanistan withdrawal reaction. I definitely expected that. But with regards to Ukraine, I don't know. I think there is an increasing mainstream media acknowledgement that the Ukrainians are not winning, that it's going to be impossible for them to get all of their territory back, and something is going to have to be figured out.
Nobody would like that more than me. Whether it actually happens, I don't know. I still think that these people have religious connections to Ukraine. They think Kyiv is the 51st state. It's crazy. The way that they think about the issue. And if there was ever real Afghanistan type images that came out, I do think it actually would cause a big problem for Trump. And at the end, what is my theme of all my commentary here with Trump? Trump is a transactional figure.
And
he
the
can
Afghanistan
easily influence.
The Afghanistan example is instructive because he knew it was popular in theory to get out of Afghanistan. But there's a reason why he didn't pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Because when you end a war, guess what? Then you have to actually grapple with the reality of what was accomplished and failed and all of those things over those years. And so it wouldn't be quite the same as Afghanistan, because obviously we didn't have troops directly there. It was a shorter time period, et cetera. But, Biden, he was quite popular, Biden was, up until the Afghan withdrawal.
Yeah, nuked him.
And it did nuke him, and he never recovered. And obviously there were other things that contributed to that negative sentiment towards him. But that really was kind of the beginning of the end of his presidency, unfortunately, because it's one of the best things that he actually did and one of the more courageous things that he actually did. But nothing will form a bipartisan consensus faster than, trying to not be in a war. They will unite against you. Fox and CNN and MSNBC, man, they will all be singing the exact same tune the minute that you try to exit or avoid a potential war. And yeah, I do think that Trump is quite aware of that.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.